Join me tonight in Ecclesiastes chapter number 7 is where we're at. Ecclesiastes chapter number 7. As we continue the message we began last week, we looked last week at Ecclesiastes chapter number 7, and he begins this section telling us if we know what's best for us, we will heed these instructions, we will heed these concerns, we will heed the attitudes and mindsets he's encouraging. And so Ecclesiastes chapter number 7 and verse number 1, it says this: a good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of one's birth. It's better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting, for that is the end of all men, and the living will lay it to his heart. Sorrow is better than laughter. Note all these ironic statements. For by the sadness of the countenance the heart is made better. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of the fools is in the house of mirth. It's better to hear the rebuke of the wise than for a man to hear the song of fools. For as the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of the fool. This also is vanity. Surely oppression maketh a wise man mad, and a gift destroyeth the heart. Better is the end of a thing than the beginning thereof. And the patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. Be not hasty in thy spirit to be angry, for anger resteth in the bosom of fools. Say not thou, what is the cause that the former days were better than these? For thou dost not inquire wisely concerning this. Chapter 7 is the answer to the questions asked in chapter number 6. We talked about that last week. Solomon ends chapter 6 by asking us these questions. Who knows what's good for man in his life? Because we are finite, because we are frail, because you and I are very limited creatures, Solomon says, who can know what's actually best and right for man? And then he asks the second question, what will be after us in this life? So Solomon begins answering those questions in chapter number 7. So we began last week seeing these ironic statements. He says it's better than, and he gives a comparison and contrast, and he does so in very ironic or poetical ways. And so he talks about what would be better in verse 1, 2, 5, 8, and number 10. So in a sense, he's telling us, in light of chapter number 6, here's how you need to live your life if you'll know what is best for you. And so he tells us that contrary to our nature, Solomon calls us away from the foolish entrapments of our temporal life to enable us to enjoy the one and the same. And so the lesson we've been looking at is resisting pleasure, pride, and pining will grant you an enjoyable life despite the hardships that come with it. So the very first thought we looked at last week as we recap is this: it's better to view life through the lens of death. It's better to view life through the lens of death. Solomon said we should reflect on death to help us keep a proper testimony. Verse number 1, it's a good name better to be chosen than precious ointment. But then he goes on and he says, reflecting on death puts one's life in proper perspective. He said that in verse number 2, go to the house of mourning rather than to a wedding. In other words, we said, go to a funeral, not a wedding. We've been giving Jordan grief about that all week. And so go to a funeral rather than a wedding, because you, if you will be humble, will learn at the funeral more than you would at the wedding. It puts our life in a proper perspective. It also helps us when we view life through the lens of death, gain maturity, as he says there in verse 3. Sorrow is better than laughter. By sadness of the countenance, your heart will be made better. Sorrow brings need. Need brings opportunity for growth and wisdom. Then, reflecting on death clarifies our pursuits. Note what he said in verse 4. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. What is he saying? When you and I are hurting, when you and I are mourning, when you and I understand our life is frail and it has a final end, we should then think of our life through that lens instead of seeking the life of ease and happiness, the house of mirth, just having a carefree, easy life. He says, oh no, that's foolish. That won't help you. That will give you misguided pursuits in this frail, short life. You should be thoughtful about the brevity of life, and therefore make your pursuits that which is eternally important, not that which is so easily enticing unto us. So, we come to point number 2 tonight, and here's our thought tonight as we start. It's better to have a tender and teachable heart than a heart filled with obstinacy and pride. It's better to have a tender and teachable heart than obstinacy and pride. Look what he says here in verse number 5. It's better to hear the rebuke of the wise than for a man to hear the song of fools. Solomon continues his ironic instructions by way of comparison and contrast. And he does that by telling us this entire passage what's best for us. And he tells what's best for us in ways that are actually not very receptive unto us. You know, many times when you want your audience to yield themselves to the truths you're trying to give out, you try to put it in the most palatable way possible. Solomon's doing the opposite here. He's using ironic statements, comparisons and contrasts that would not immediately be palatable unto us, but it's what he does the entire passage. Now the ironic expression before us is this: it's better to hear the rebuke of the wise than a song due to the ones dispensing both. And so the first thought he gives us tonight, you want to be a humble hearer. You want to be a humble hearer. Look what he says here in verse number 5. It's better to hear the rebuke of the wise than for a man to hear the song of fools. And so we want to be a humble hearer. He tells us it's better for us to hear this rebuke of the wise. The word better here means it's more pleasant, beneficial, and desirable to have this. What does he say it's better to have? The rebuke of the wise. Now think about what Solomon's saying. You and I should understand how much more valuable it is to be rebuked. The word rebuked here means an act or expression of censure or criticism. It means somebody who's willing to correct you, somebody who's even willing to threaten you or show you the threats that are looming for you. And so he says, you want to receive the rebuke of the wise. Now, immediately, everyone's human nature would recoil at this statement because all of us recoil at even the slightest rebuke, do we not? You can just nod even though you may not agree with that. It's true. If you walk up to me, you're like, that's an interesting tie. I don't think I'd wear it. That's a subtle rebuke, isn't it? Kind of the backhanded compliment, as it were. If I walk up to you and say, you know, that shade of blue is not maybe the best shade on you. What happens immediately? We kind of recoil like, don't reprove me. Man, that doesn't do anything for your eyes or your hair. Wait. Who do you think you are? We always recoil. That's what our sin nature does. We don't like any level of correction in our sin nature, do we? And so Solomon says here, but let me help you. It is good for you. It is best for you. It's better for you even to take the rebuke of the wise. Though it may be naturally unpalatable, it's necessary. Why is it necessary? Well, as none of us are without sin, there are none of us above the need for rebuke. There are none of us above the need of rebuke. I want you to see what Solomon says here about this. He cites the source of the one doing the rebuking. Lest we think this is just open season for us to run around rebuking people or open season for people to rebuke us. He says, you and I, we need the rebuke, but here's the source the rebuke needs to come from. It needs to come from the wise. The word wise here indicates someone who's skillful, someone who's intelligent, someone who is discerning. But we'd understand, because of Solomon being the author in the biblical context, for someone to be considered wise biblically, it doesn't mean they're rich. It doesn't mean they are vastly intelligent. It means they are someone who fears the Lord. That's what it is to be wise. And so he says, you should receive the rebuke of the wise. Somebody who fears God, somebody who understands his economy, his authority, someone who is exempling that to us. And he says, what should you do when somebody who is wise comes and reproves you? What should you do when they tell you about the threats looming you spiritually in God's economy? What should you do when they correct or criticize you? Note what he says in verse 5. It's better to what? Hear. Hear. The word hear doesn't just indicate a casuality like, Oh, yeah, I think I heard something about that. Yeah. Oh, did you hear that? As if it was faint and casual. The word here indicates you and I are trying to listen with intentionality. It even pulls us further. The word here in the context, in the sense in Hebrew, is not even just, I heard it, or I'll listen to you. It's listening with an amount of willingness and eagerness to act upon what you hear. So it's not just, I heard you. It's, okay, what? So I can follow through. So he says, it's better to be willing and intentional and ready to hear the rebuke, the correction, the criticism, the instruction from somebody who fears God. Now, this idea of hearing is something that we laugh about in our family. In our family, you're not allowed to say, I didn't hear you if you were within earshot, because that's not true. You heard me. That's not my wife. We do it to each other all the time. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. No, you weren't listening. It's different, isn't it? This here is not talking about hearing. It's talking about listening. And if we are going to be true listeners, people who are ready to act upon the rebuke of the wise, my friend, that means, that necessitates, that demands, if we're going to listen at that level, that we be humble. Humble. You have to be willing to take it in, what the wise says to you. You have to be willing to fight your desire to fight back against it or argue with the person speaking with you. You have to be humble enough to ask the Lord to help you with what is being said to you. Unless we be concerned about the wise being the one who gets to do the rebuking instead of you and I getting to do the rebuking, may we be reminded the wise person will have the proper foundation. They will be somebody who fears the Lord. So their rebuke is not based in subjectivity like somebody else would be. The wise person has a proper foundation for rebuking. They have a proper motivation, biblical love, not ego. And so here they are. If you and I have somebody who is fearing the Lord and does rebuke us, Solomon says this, you better listen. And don't just listen, be humble enough to be ready to act upon what they say. Many times I think we're guilty of the opposite of James. We're hearers of the word. Whether the word is preached, whether the word is taught, whether the word is dispensed from the wise to us in Christian fellowship. But I fear often we're sadly lacking in being doers of the word. And Solomon says, oh no, my friend, you need to hear the rebuke of the wise. I want you to consider what the wise person risks to instruct you. Have you ever thought about that? He says, you should receive the rebuke of the wise. I want you to consider for a moment the risk anytime someone who is wise tries to instruct someone else spiritually before God. That wise person has to evaluate, are you even willing to receive it? If you aren't willing, how can they try to help you be willing to receive it? They have to go through this evaluation. Is what I'm saying biblically accurate? They have to be willing to confront you then and seek wisdom on how to speak with you or I about something that's contrary to our desire or outlook. They risk agitation, right? When you are rebuked, what rises up first? Humility? No. Fight back, right? Argue back. The person who is fearing the Lord and trying to help a brother or sister out in Christ is risking agitating that person about something they need correction about. And that then can also lead to that person being agitated and saying something back to the person that may agitate them, right? You know what? Sometimes we're trying to help someone, they're going to push your buttons, right? They're going to say something back to you. They're going to try to attack you. And the same temptations that they've given into will rise within you and I as well if we are the one being the wise rebuker. And so they are risking agitation with somebody. They're even risking a separation with somebody. The one being in giving the instruction may end up having to sever the relationship due to the unwise choices. But can I say, they're also risking the one being instructed being so obstinate that they just push back and say, you know what, I'm done with you. I don't want nothing to do with this. So what is Solomon saying? Solomon's saying, be a humble hearer. You don't get to always walk around being the wise rebuker, do you? It's not that often. Now, there's sometimes due to family structure, due to church structure, due to Christian fellowship, you'll be the wise rebuker. And may we be somebody who fears the Lord and directs them accordingly with a proper foundation and motivation. But can I remind you, most often than not, we're going to be called to be the one receiving the rebuke of the wise. And if you can't remember the last time you received the rebuke of the wise, there's a problem there. Solomon's saying it's better for you to have a humble, teachable, pliable, tender heart than to have what I'm calling, secondly tonight, the haughty, have fun only kind of heart. The haughty, have fun only heart. What do you mean, Pastor? No, what he says. It's better to hear the rebuke of the wise than for a man to hear the song of fools. Solomon gives the comparison and contrast by saying not to give one's intentional, focused attention to the song of fools. What's Solomon doing? Solomon is using something we can all identify with, music. And when you and I hear songs, those compositions are that which it can change or affect our intellect and our emotions, cannot? That's what music can do. You can hear something, and boy, it can make you in a dour mood in a hurry if we're not careful. It can be something that lifts your heart and lifts your spirits, builds your faith even, encourages your faith. And so Solomon says there's this song, but note what the song is given by or composed by. The fool. The compositions given here are by somebody who's a fool. Now, the word fool here literally means someone who is stupid, someone who is lacking discernment, someone who does not consider the future, but only lives for the present. In a biblical sense, just like the wise person would be defined, a fool is someone who argues with the existence of God and denies his authority in all matters, specifically their life. So, Solomon says it's better to be rebuked by the wise than to give heed and listen and give your attention to the song of the fool. What's the song of the fool encapsulated? The song of the fool entices us to operate upon that which indulges our own desires and resists the authority of God in our lives. Is everybody with me? He says, don't give in to the song of the fool, that which would call you to live as you please and deny God's authority, deny God's presence, deny God's power in your life. And so this song calls us then, if we give into it, to live for the present, live without thought of the future or accountability, just live as we please. I like the way Charles Bridges wrote. He said this, it's only a reckless determination to fill your mind so as to leave no room for the thoughts of death or eternity. What's he saying? He's saying the song of the fool just wants to fill you and I up with so much temporary enjoyment and enticement as to drown out what God is desirous of to do in and through our lives for the matter of eternity, understanding the brevity of this life. To illustrate just how quick and fleeting the song of the fool type of life is, this happy now life is, note what he says in verse 6. For as the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of the fool. This is also vanity. Verse number 6 here illustrates the profitability of the songs of the fools. He says their laughter, the result of living that way, according to the song of the fool, it's like crackling thorns under a pot. You know, such twigs make a loud noise when you set them alight. You can set those things alight, but their heat is short-lived. They don't burn that long. They don't burn long enough to even heat up a pot of water, perhaps. There may be other things here that we could learn from the crackling thorns, but the reality is this. They're short-lived. They don't serve much profitability and or usefulness. All that the fool might counsel you to do, Solomon is saying, will only result in short-termed happiness, short-lived happiness. Really, all he's saying is what some of the prophets would say later on. There's only pleasure in sin for how long? A season. A season. To give this idea of how quick the crackling thorns burn up, I will illustrate maybe by telling you something really foolish I did on Monday night. I'd finished mowing the yard. I had a brush pile that I needed to burn, and it was made up of some branches, a bunch of dry leaves, a bunch of dried weeds. Make sure I say that clearly for the live stream audience. Weeds. And we'd put this in this pile in our backyard. And me, being a genius, being out of lighter fluid, decided I'd use gasoline as my accelerant. So I poured it around there, And then I did what I thought would be smart and wise for my time with the chaplain in the fire department. I made myself a skinny trail of gas. I put the gas way over here. I put some gas on the end of the stick. I lit said stick. We were back away from it. I lit said gas, and woof, woof, the fireball went up, but it also went out. It burned up everything real fast, including the hair on my feet because I was in sandals, part of my beard, which is why I'm nice and clean shaven, and some of my eyebrow and some of my arm hair, and I smelled horrible. So it's a woof. And it was scary. It was exhilarating, not in a good way. It was startling. My blood was pumping. My girls were screaming as they were in their playhouse watching Dad try to kill himself unintentionally. But I turned back around. You know what's not there anymore? My fire. It burned up all that gas and all those leaves. You know what's still staring me? All those sticks. It didn't do anything. It was short-lived, though exhilarating. It was short-lived. Solomon's giving that same idea here. The crackling thorns under a pot. If you took a pot and you needed to boil it and you wanted to do something profitable with it, and you put it on top of these thorns, you tried to light them up, they would burn so fast and crackle that nothing proper. And it'd make a lot of noise. The laughter of fools didn't make a lot of noise. It would even light up quickly and burn quickly. But how much would you have when those were done burning? How well would the pot of water be for either dyeing something, for cleaning something, for cooking food? How much profit would there be with that pot? Solomon says, absolutely nothing. He says, and it's no different with the lifestyle of the happy, have fun now heart. The haughty heart that says, I don't need the rebuke of the wise. I'm going to listen to that sweet song of the fool. And I'm going to see the laughter that comes with that. The result of living however I want with no accountability. Living not in light of eternity, but living in the now. Living how I want. Living how I feel. And he says, oh, my friends, it's like crackling thorns. What does he say at the end of verse 6? One of his favorite sayings in the whole book. What is it? This is also what? Vanity. He's trying to help us realize you should view life through the lens of death. And when you're living this life, you should have a humble heart, not a haughty, I'm going to have fun kind of heart the way I want, because all that will do is lead to nothing. It will lead to emptiness. As futile as it be to attempt to heat that pot, so will the thinking of I can have this have fun only lifestyle. It will not produce anything of eternal profit or value. It may to be appearing to others as if it's worthy of their time and attention. It may even entice you or I, but in reality, all it does is call us to live a failing and fleeting life, wasting the precious time in the present to live for that which will not matter forever. So, Solomon says, you need to live with a humble heart. You need to reject the haughty, have-fun heart that will be luring you your whole life. But he says lastly tonight, we need to take heed. Why do we need to take heed, Solomon? Because any of us can go from wise to fool rather quickly. From wise to fool rather quickly. I want you to see verse number 7, what he says. Surely oppression maketh a wise man mad, and a gift destroyeth the heart. Solomon, in light of the need to heed wise people and shun foolish people, speaks of the need to be discerning of how one goes from one to become the other. So Solomon cites two types of temptation that can sway a person into foolishness, and the certainty of their destination is evident by his word in verse number 7. He says, surely. In other words, what I'm telling you is a non-negotiable truth here in verse 7. You want to go from wise to fool, give in to these two temptations. The first temptation is the temptation to utilize power for the life of the fool, the foolish life. Note the word he uses in verse 7. Surely oppression maketh a wise man mad. The word oppression here means this, to have brutality, the act of subjugating somebody else or another group of people by cruelty, to extort them, to take away something from them with violence, to injure them for your own benefit. The idea is here that at some level you will perpetrate injustice upon the undeserving or upon the unsuspecting. Now, lest we think this can't happen to us, Bishop Cartwright writes this. He says, all of us are either subject to the power of others and therefore in danger of oppression, or we are invested with power and therefore tempted to oppress. The old Baptist pastor had it right, did he not? You and I may say, oh, I'm usually the one on the receiving end of oppression. But he said, listen, if you were in the same spot, the temptation would still be as real to you as it is to anybody else. And note what he says. Oppression maketh a wise man mad. And then he goes beyond that. He says, gifts destroy their heart. The other temptation to be on guard for is money. The word gift here can mean just a present. But in its usage here and throughout the Old Testament, this Hebrew word typically was used for a bribe. Now, we know what a bribe is, right? It's when we give a payment to someone in authority in return for special favors. Special favors that usually encourage, allow, turn a blind eye to, or facilitate illegal activities, right? Now, I want you to think about what he's saying here. This bribe destroys the heart. So note what Solomon says about these two temptations, how they change somebody from wise to foolish. He says, oppression maketh a wise man mad. He doesn't mean oppression makes a wise man mad, like because he's oppressed, he becomes mad about the oppression. The word here is this: he that is given the opportunity to oppress, the opportunity and the temptation will arise. And if they utilize that, the giving into that temptation it will become them. They will become mad. The word mad here is not like I'm angry mad. The word is here to be boastful, to lack judgment, to be infatuated with power to the point of raving like a foolish madman. You get to the point that you are not living like a wise man anymore. You are living like somebody who is against God, raving mad in his economy. And I want you to see what else he says. The gift, taking that bribe, corrupts us from the inside out. It says it destroys our heart. When we receive gifts to pervert holiness in our manner of living or interactions with others, it begins corrupting us in our intellect, our emotion, and in our will. We become fixated upon ourselves and callous towards others. What is Solomon saying? You want to go from wise to fool? Start utilizing any power or authority you have in this life to please yourself. And then, when others would want to do something to incur your favor at any level, whether it was in the job sector, the private sector, the personal sector, whatever it is, if you would give yourself over to being tainted in your decisions or twisted in your decisions because of the benefit that may come from it for you personally, he says that will start moving you from wise to fool. And you will be corrupted in the inner man, and your choices will not reflect the fear of God. Those things that are utilized in that manner make somebody who is wise, somebody is simple, somebody is fool. It taints and perverts them all the way around. So what should we do? Take heed. If Solomon's saying, take the rebuke of the wise. When somebody preaches the word and you are immediately offended by it, take the rebuke of the wise. When somebody's in your Bible study class teaching you, take the rebuke of the wise. When somebody in Christian fellowship is trying to help you, take the rebuke of the wise. When you opened up the Bible this morning, and I hope you did, and you were encouraged, but you were also convicted, take the rebuke of the wise. Conviction is a good thing. Yeah, it's a good thing. Take the rebuke of the wise. Don't live for the song of the fool like all those around you are doing. He says you better take heed. Take heed for what's best for you, what's right. Don't automatically go to those, and don't live in such a way that entices yourself. And when others try to entice you in that manner, you should realize they're foolish and not take their counsel, not live the way they're encouraging you to live. And maybe I could try to illustrate the choice Solomon's giving with what happened to me this morning. I got to enjoy my day the way everybody hopes to wake up and enjoy their day, going to the dentist, right? I apparently had forgotten about, but my phone reminded me I had to get a flossing cavity taken care of at 8 a.m. this morning. So I get to go there, and you guys know the drill, right? It's bad. It'll catch on later. They numb you up with the topical, then they come back in, and they Novocaine or whatever it is, I have no idea, whatever it is, they just pump you full of it, and then you get the Botox face working, right? So you're getting that? So they do my filling. I'm talking with her as I'm leaving, and she says to me, now you can drink what you like, but do not eat anything until the numbness wears off. I said, okay. I said, just because it's soft? She goes, oh, no. Because you're numb, you won't know that you're eating the side of your cheek. Don't do it. I said, ooh. She goes, yeah, it happens all the time. Don't do it. Till that feeling comes back, don't eat anything. It'll be better for you. You'll regret it if you do. Okay. Now, let me try to illustrate our passage tonight by saying this. If she told me, hey, you know what? Eat what you like. What do you feel like right now? Do you feel like tacos? I do feel like tacos. It's 8:30 in the morning. Breakfast tacos sound fantastic. She says, go for it. Now, that's enticing. That would be pleasing to go have breakfast tacos at 8:30 in the morning. But if she really is wise about the situation, she is going to rebuke me from wanting to get breakfast tacos early in the morning, right? She's going to rebuke me from wanting to go eat anything. I'm at a crossroads. I can give in to my own self, which would be the song of the fool, or I can heed the rebuke, the correction. Well, I want to eat tacos. Don't do it, Paul. You just got a feeling, and you can't feel half your face. It's not going to be wise. Not only that, it's going to be gross because you'll have stuff coming out your mouth because you can't control that side of your mouth. Pastor David was laughing at me earlier because I was trying to drink out of my coffee cup, and it's like, all this Botox face. It's unbelievable. So my point is this. I heeded what she said. And when it finally wore off, I got to eat, and I was thankful for that. But if I'd done it against her counsel, it would have been foolish to my own peril. What would have been worse is this. What if she had said to me, eat whatever you want, whenever you want? You know, do you feel like eating now? Yeah, I do. Do it. Now it's even worse, isn't it? On her and on me, because it's only leading to bad things, vanity. Solomon's trying to help you and I tonight recognize it is better to have a humble heart. You and I, as we live under the sun, it's better to let a wise person rebuke us than try to live a haughty, heart of fun type of lifestyle. Will we hear the rebuke of the wise? Will we have that humble and tender heart? One person said it like this. People often claim to hunger for the truth, but seldom like the taste when served up. May we not be so foolish. Solomon gives all these ironic statements to try to shake us out of what we would think would be logical, reasonable, rational in our sin-tainted mind, to help us realize what's really best for you under the sun is to take the rebuke of the wise. What's really best for you under the sun is not to live unto yourself. What's really best under the sun for the God in heaven is to live with this brief life focused and in view, not on self, not on how you think you should be able to schedule your time and use your money, and not how much time the church uses up of your time, and how much money the gospel takes up, and how hard it is to have a Christian marriage, and how difficult it is to read and pray. Oh, no. Heed the rebuke of the wise. Go forward in those things, knowing that's where value really does lie, here and now. And anything else contrary is only going to rob you of what God is able and desirous to do through your life. And so, my friends, tonight, may we be, as Solomon says, humble, pliable, and teachable. If you really know what's best for you, if I really know what's best for me, I'll live this life through the lens of death, and I will have a humble, pliable, teachable heart that I take heed if I'm starting to slide from wise to fool. And if those around me are fools, I will depart and listen to the counsel of the wise. Father, help each of us tonight, each man, each woman, to consider their relationships. May they consider the choices they make. May they ask themselves, what's motivating this choice? What's motivating my decision today about my scheduling? What's motivating my decision today about finances? What's motivating my decision about involvement in my child's life? What's motivating my decision in the way I'm structuring and prioritizing time? And then may we step back and recognize and ask the question, when's the last time I've heeded the word from the pulpit, the word in a class, the word from a brother or sister in Christ, the word from reading it and meditating and memorizing it? When's the last time I was rebuked and acted upon the rebuke in the right manner? Lord, may each of our hearts tonight, mine included, be humble, pliable, and teachable. There's no way to be a man or a woman after your heart when we heed the song of the fool. When we want to have the haughty heart that says, I don't have to listen to God, I can do my own thing. When we say, I can live unto self and live my life now, a have fun kind of life now, a have fun by a worldly idea instead of a balanced, grace-filled, enjoyable, exciting Christian life with you, living for eternity, not bound up in the vanity of the present. So help each of us tonight to examine that. Each young person, each adult to ask, do I have a humble, tender, pliable heart? Have I received rebuke, criticism, even threats of what may be looming in my life spiritually if I don't make changes kind of decision, kind of heart? So Lord, help us, all of us tonight, for your glory in Christ's name. Amen. Let's take a moment with our heads bowed, our eyes closed, just to give a moment. I don't know what's going on tonight in your life, but I do know this. Whatever the decisions are you're facing, I just ask how humble and pliable your heart is. You know, it's evident when you don't receive the word. It's evident when we don't seek counsel from those we know would use the word to help us. Tonight, I just ask you, with what's going on in your life, the choices you're making, is it evident that you're receiving the rebuke of the wise? Or, my friend, do you have no need for that because we're living the song of a fool tonight? Our heads are bowed, our eyes are closed. Let's take a moment to consider where our hearts truly are at. Stand tonight to be dismissed with what Brother Matt's playing on 385 if you need it, 385. We'll stand and this will be our dismissal song of praise, and may it also be a prayer from our heart at the same time. 385. On the first with me now. I can hear my Savior calling. I can hear my Savior calling. I can hear my Savior calling. Take thy cross and follow, follow me. Where he leads me, I will follow. Where he leads me, I will follow. Where he leads me, I will follow. And go with him all the way. Appreciate your faithfulness. We'll look forward to seeing you on Sunday. You are dismissed.